Welcome to Stanford, a truly massive institution with over 15,000 students, 8,000 acres, and $16 billion in endowment. Numbers that truly boggle the mind. A gargantuan institution like this has hundreds of thousands of moving parts, all functioning seamlessly to ensure the continued operation and existence of the organization. Agency, or getting things done, is the fuel that drives the countless cogs of the mega machine. Where does this fuel, this agency, come from, and how does it manifest? Who has authority on campus? Where does the power lie? How do things get done in an institution of this scale? We wanted to start an exploration by asking students what came to mind when they heard the word authority.
NSA.
Police officers and how much they suck.
Administration, counselors, people who have desk jobs who sit back, and aren't getting too much of a taste of what the students are going through, who are living off experiences of what it was in their day.
According to the students, one of the main visible forms of agency on campus were the patrolling police officers who could close down entire parties if they were getting too unruly. These were the ultimate authority figures, wielding a form of agency that can be categorized as potestas, or the big stick. The other form of agency that was most visible to the students was the administrative officers, hordes of admins who dictated academic policy and disciplinary action and handled all the bureaucratic functioning of the university. On the surface, it appears that agency and the ability to get things done exists in primarily two states on campus: potestas, brute force, and imperium, or administrative authority. But we had a suspicion that auctoritas, or influence, has a massive role to play in getting things done, and was simply not as visible. To help answer our questions, we decided to turn to people who were in the midst of the bureaucratic engine. We approached Colleen, an undergraduate advisor in the STS department.
We're just looking at this project on kind of how things get done, whereas a lot of people think it's just through sort of formal hierarchies and people telling each other what to do. But a lot of the times it's because you know somebody and sort of just asking them for favors and requests. So sort of in your experience, have you had this sort of happen before where things happen outside of the formal hierarchy?
Absolutely. So one of the problems, or not problems, but one of the unique things about Stanford is it's completely decentralized. So every department, every center is doing something completely different and nobody else knows what they're doing. And so when you need information, you don't always know who to talk to, right? So it's actually really hard for new employees because it's a culture that you kind of have to form, and the relationships are what's key to it. As a new employee, when you come in, you drown. I mean, if you need to know how to schedule a course, if you need to know where a petition is turned in for a student has a problem, you need to know how to call. Most often, you would start with one center and get transferred 3 or 4 times. You submit a help ticket, the ticket gets transferred a few times. So I always tell new student services staff when they come on, the key is the relationships. Because I work for STS, we have 5 employees, I'm the only student services person. So to know the student services people in every single department, I have to go do that on my own. But by doing that, they are the ones that have the information. So even now, I've been in this job 5 years. If I have a super simple question, how do I add a section to this class? For example, I do not go on the registrar website. I do not call the registrar. I don't submit a help ticket. I pick up the phone and I call a student services person that I know is going to answer.
Very cool.
And as a result of that, we've created actually this group called the Student Services Officer Superstars on campus. Totally informal. We meet once a month on a topic. So we'll do something like honors programs or that sort of thing. We gather and there's nobody. It's actually interesting. The dean's office was involved on this email list and kind of group. They were asked to be removed.
Oh, wow.
And one of the reasons for that is that people can't be as open sharing. They feel like if the hierarchy is involved, they might get in trouble for something or some way they're doing something. So this group meets once a month and everyone just exchanges ideas of how we're doing it in our program or our department. And that's how things get done. It's not by looking at websites. It's not by talking to a dean and finding out what's done in the school, because they may not know either. And if they do know, it could take months to get an email back or to get the information or the right person to contact.
Interesting. So how did you go, when you first came in, how did you go about building those relationships? Was it going to talking to people? Was it like lunch break, coffee break? How do you get to start meeting people in sort of the other departments who do things you're trying to do? Yeah.
So when I was first hired, I had to take all these in-person classes on training how to use the systems. I looked for kind and warm eyes in those classes, and I latched on. I made new friends. We met for lunch, and as we kind of built this little clique of student services people, more people became interested and involved. They asked to join for lunch. And so being that I've been in student services for 5 years and a lot of people move around, I've become one of the old timers now. So when new people come on campus, they're referred to talk to me or to be added to this group. So this group is pretty new, about 2 years or so. It's really been strong. And now when new employees come on, they're told to add themselves to this email list. Because people email too. If I need to schedule a class, real quick email. Hey you guys, or this web form's not working, what are you doing? Or student asked this, don't know. People respond immediately. And now they're recommended to actually be added to that. Even though it's not run by the school, it's not run by the deans, it's kind of an informal kind of club, you might say. But it's the most efficient use of everyone's time.
And sort of with this informal club, how important is that face-to-face time? Is it like a big difference between sending an email, or do you guys get to meet in person? And generally when you're building relationships, how important is that face-to-face time?
I think it's important. I think it's hard because we're all so busy. We're stuck, like, here I am in the basement. I'm not interacting with student services people. They're not coming in and out. So by meeting them once a month in person is helpful as far as networking goes. They really get to know your personality versus a phone call or an email. I think that's going to help me in the long term as far as moving around in my job. It also helps me because in person you often find out different things, like, oh, I'm involved in. So then when I have a question about that, I can pick up the phone and call them. We also have monthly kind of all school meetings, but we really don't get a chance to talk in those, so most people don't know who each other are.
Interesting.
So this group is kind of crucial to introducing people to each other.
And what we see is kind of the main benefits of the group. One, it makes things a lot more efficient, but is there an element of also it's just more fun than having to like go and
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to be honest, when I started this job, I was lonely.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get any interaction with any other student services people at all. And when I started, it was a staff of 3.
Wow.
One being Professor McGinn, who's a faculty member who isn't really hanging out down here as my friend. So I spent lunch breaks alone, and I didn't have anyone to call. So it was lonely. It can be a lonely job when you're doing the only job at a very decentralized department. Absolutely. So now that I've networked and stuff, I'm always going out to lunch and meeting new people and that sort of thing.
So it's also about the community that builds.
Absolutely.
We then decided to explore the D School, a hugely innovative institution on campus, which placed a special emphasis on creativity, empathy, and collaboration in their processes. At the D School, we decided to approach Tammy, the program ninja, who is responsible for much of the agency of getting things done, and an individual who truly cherished the power of human relationships and community building.
Yeah, so we're here with Tammy, who's the program ninja at the D School. I just love that title. It's like, after talking, it's the coolest title ever. And so our project is kind of on the notion of how things get done in an organization or on a campus. And a lot of people think things get done just through the hierarchy and people ordering other people around. But a lot of the time it's about sort of relationships in the community and sort of asking for favors and people giving you favors. And so we know that the D School really exemplifies some of those philosophies. So we just want to hear from you. Any specific stories you have about how things get done, not just through a hierarchy, sort of how stuff happens?
Great.
Yeah.
We do this all the time. So recently, I'll give you an example. Recently, we had an event that I was in charge of. I was the ninja, and I actually needed help pulling it off. And I don't have anyone beneath me, and we didn't have a meeting to say, okay, here I'm going to dole out, like, you do this, you do this, you do this. What we did was I pulled together a few people, a pop-up team that were excited to work, and I found people that could do, like, I needed someone to do what we call a tablescape, to make the tables look different. We have someone here that does that really well. I don't particularly. Anyway, so we pulled everyone together, and everybody kind of found the thing that they did well, and they jumped in and we all worked together. We had a brainstorm session on, hey, we could do this. Yes, and we could do this, and we could do that. And it turned out to be a lot of fun. and the event was a success.
Awesome. And were these people sort of in different departments, so it wasn't like their official job to kind of help?
Exactly, right. So we had someone that does our finances that jumped in to do a particular part of the event. We had someone that works on another program. None of the people I used had anything to do with my program. But because I can foster here at the D School good relationships and cultivate that kind of climate of jumping in and helping out, I was able to tap those people and say, hey, you want to jump in on my project.
What do you think is part of the secret sauce of sort of forming those good relationships where people will just drop what they're doing if they're really busy to come help someone else out?
I think it's because it's reciprocal. I mean, because I can do it for them and they do it for me. We just have that culture here. When I first came to the D School, I would say to people, well, how is this done? How do we do this? And basically it's, how would you like to do it? Do you have an idea? Try it, prototype it, does it work? And so it automatically you start to work with other people and talk to people and say, find out more about them and more about how they do things and kind of weave that into your own way of doing it.
Awesome.
So it's something that we foster a lot.
And before you were with the D School, some of the organizations you worked with previously, is there a big difference between some of those and the D School?
Exactly. Yeah. When I needed something, say financial, I would have to say, like, who do I go to? I'd have to ask someone, who do I ask about this, or look through the Stanford's administrative guide of like who can translate what this actually means, and it was a lot more cumbersome and not fun at all. So I prefer this way of working. And things seem to get done much easier and you have more fun doing it and the outcome is much, much better.
After taking a good look at how Auctoritas functioned at the administrative level, we realized that getting things done involved a lot of influence, human relationships, and the transfer of favors through a network. We were curious to see if similar dynamics of influence applied in the student body. So we spoke to Lucas Flossie, a former social chair of a major fraternity, to see if similar mechanisms applied.
Hi, my name is Lucas Flossie. I am a senior at Stanford University. I'm a mechanical engineering student. So I'm also a part of Delta Tau Delta fraternity, and I was the social chair for about 2 years. And when we did our transition over to the new social chairs, they were kind of unorganized and they weren't able to get their all their dates booked and book sororities and establish parties. So all of our event calendar was completely empty because sororities fill up very fast, and so that was it was a pretty bad situation. So I came in, and fortunately I knew a lot of the older people in the sororities. I knew the president of Kappa Gamma, for example, and I knew the Rex social chairs, and I knew a lot of people in Kappa and Tri Delt, which are two of the bigger sororities on campus, and I was able to talk to them and really just explain the situation to them, and because they were good friends, and they were able to squeeze us in. So that was, it was huge for us. We went from having no events, and just because I knew a couple people, I was able to just get what I needed and what my group needed.
In our explorations, we realized that community centers on campus were a massive source of agency. They would organize large events and were a big driving force. Student government was another big source of agency, so we decided to interview Teek Chapa, a recent graduate who played a pivotal role in the El Centro Chicano Community Center and in student government elections, capable of influencing entire elections.
My name's Teek Chapa. I'm a friend of these two guys and excited to help out with their project. I think for me, one thing I like to do is put on a lot of different events. And kind of through that, since my first year at Stanford and through the rest of the years after, really got to meet a lot of people through events and get to figure out how things kind of work on campus on the event side. And I learned that we have a lot of centralized structures. So there's a way you're supposed to order food. There's a way you're supposed to get security, a way you get the venue, a way that you can book speakers, a way that you can outreach to people. We brought about 100 professionals to campus. And I guess the thing I'm most proud about is we did it essentially for free. And while everything looked like it was done entirely by the book, the one that I had learned through a lot of Hard Knocks, actually almost none of it was. That started with the venue. So booking the venue, you have to verify that you're working with a student group, and a myriad of other things, and then someone clicks approved and you have the chance to book the room. The person that did that, I won't say her name, but she had worked with me a lot, and on this one she let slide quite a few things, so the venue were okay, except for the fact that no student staffer, it was before a holiday, but no student staffer wanted to work at the venue that day, and so if you don't have a staffer at the venue, you don't have the venue. So then we had the staffer's immediate boss essentially finagle or strong arm one of the student staffers to sit at the desk for that venue. So the venue was taken care of. Money wise, because we got the green light on our, essentially the application, we were viewed as if we were a student group. So then we pay essentially nothing for the venue. The way that you pay speakers is done in a particular way and goes through a myriad of systems and organizations and infrastructure. So we just paid them under the table. So when we got red flag there for not doing things by the book for this on the speaker's end, folks just looked the other way. So on the venue side, on the speakers, food, we got much more cheaply than we would have otherwise because of the nature of the event and who we were bringing. And then the folks who at the Treehouse, beautiful food, they had worked with me before, and so kind of last minute they said, hey, you know, we'll deliver this order at cost essentially. So for venue, for paying speakers, for the food, we all kind of, at the end it looked by the book again, but because I had the chance to work with a lot of different administrators and people who signed off on things, was able to do something that wasn't quite by the book. One instance of things getting done on campus, or one can view it as things getting done, is in our campus student government. A lot of folks think that money is distributed and things happen in student government, I guess by chance or fate or somehow organically materialize. One particular instance where folks just think things are left up to the universe is in elections. So in Stanford student government for the past, I think it's 3 or 4 years, there's been a particular group of students, a coalition called the Students of Color Coalition. So they've had a supermajority in our Senate, so 10 or more out of 15, and then elected the president and vice president. So whoever this group picks has a supermajority, the last few years gets a supermajority in the Senate, and then has their executive serve in our student government. And from personal experience, what I saw is, and having been a part of it, of helping get folks elected for this particular group called SOC, was that there's a lot of people are doing a lot of different things and asking of a lot from friends of theirs and many different people. There's kind of a centralized core which helps figure out, you know, who are people very interested in serving in student government, who would care to help students through being on student government, and then the fun part and the interesting part is to see how this core group of leaders of many student groups begins to leverage kind of the student group relationships with 3,000 or 4,000 Stanford undergrads. Favors are called in, you know, a lot of texts, emails, calls, a lot of one-on-one conversations, but really the goal is to get thousands of people to kind of meet these candidates and to eventually vote for them. And so again, a lot of folks think, hey, this thing kind of happens and the same result ends up, and some of us who are part of it really see, you know, on in an organization and kind of outreach built on toothpicks and gum and favors and requests and hopes, we're able to, interact with and connect with a few thousand students. So it's a really, really fun thing, down from, friends of ours who don't even, who know, hey, a few times a year they're going to be asked to do particular things, do outreach to their small groups of friends and their one particular dance group. And from kind of the core, seeing it as, hey, there are 300 plus groups who benefit from this, and really, figuring out, hey, how can our centralized core engage over 300 plus groups and thousands of students, and really being a part of helping build that was a great experience, and just helped me learn, like, nothing happens by accident, especially at a scale like that, or on the advocacy or political side or campaign side, that really nothing happens by accident, and that things are built sometimes on as small a thing as knowing someone from your iHum, or as sharing an interest with someone, and from that, that one kind of relationship, 1,000 times over, you can have a movement.
So this is the director's commentary. We're going to kind of talk about some of the things that we found interesting in our video and kind of the interviews that we had. So it's going to be mostly off the cuff, but I'd like to start out I think it was interesting what the students said. I was kind of wondering what their answer was going to be like, and it turned out it was kind of exactly what we needed for this video. Most of them thought of the cliched answer of Hennessy or the police or some form of like an easily visible protestas or Imperium, and that was a good little intro.
Yeah, it was interesting to see that most students actually hadn't thought about the auctoritas component of agency, of getting things done on Stanford's campus. They only seem to focus on the other two. And it might be because auctoritas is just harder to see. Mm-hmm. Influence is a very subtle thing. It happens below the surface. It's all about doing favors back and forth. Sort of connecting it back to the class is almost like we looked at a lot of the ancient cultures at Stonehenge and things like that, where we saw that auctoritas actually had a big role to play when it came to like families helping each other out and then sort of building these monuments. I think it's just a subtler thing that people tend to miss.
Yeah, I mean, another reason I think they might miss it is because, a lot of students kind of have to go through all the paperwork of getting this signed or that signed or talking to this professor, but they don't really, I don't know if they would consider that authority. Yet it is a form of authority or like power, just because, if you want to get something done, you have to go to these like people like Colleen or Tammy. That's kind of inevitable, and yet we don't really consider it to be like the traditional sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was also interesting to see with Colleen, you mentioned her, how she was in an administrative role. So there was Imperium at play there, because it was all sort of elected positions of power, and there was a power structure there. But even within that administrative or that Imperium form of agency, there was a lot of auctoritas at play. A lot of times the bureaucracy was very confusing, the rules and processes. So the only way Colleen could navigate the administration was by calling up a friend. Was again asking for favors, doing favors herself, sort of really engaging with auctoritas in order to get things done within an administrative or Imperium set of agencies. So it's interesting to see how those things almost nested together.
Yeah, going off that, Tammy was very similar. She was she kind of formed her own network and kind of just put people that she found in the different roles, and she brought them together. But I think one interesting thing about both Colleen and Tammy is, obviously they're both women, but I think they might have a large role in how they develop their sense of agency. Just because I think maybe perhaps it's because women are more social, and they tend to kind of develop their own groups as opposed to men who might try to strike out on their own. But yeah, both of these women really kind of took their own situation into their own hands. They saw that they saw something that was lacking in the system, and they brought people together to kind of fix that.
I think the key was their ability to build community, because auctoritas or influence, or this unofficial influence, requires a very strong network of human relationships in order to call upon those favors and do those favors back and forth. So I think they were really good at building that community feel, that community aspect in the SDS administrative circle as well as the D School administrative circle.
Mm. And then moving on to the student side of it, that was also, I mean, I expected some level of networking at the frat level, but I don't know. It was interesting to see Lucas's example because he'd told me about it briefly, but I didn't know. So the real story is that we were I'm in the frat as well, but we were in a deep situation where the younger guys had absolutely no events planned, and literally all Lucas had to do was he went to someone in the sorority who was high up, and because he knew her, he said, "Look, this is the situation. We really need your help." And the next week we had a party. So I think he downplayed it just a little bit, but so it's incredible, like the amount of influence.
It's also interesting to see how Michael Shanks mentioned this in class when he spoke about you've got these three types of agency, but the most effective one in many cases is auctoritas, or influence. Because in the case of potestas, a big stick, the moment the guy with the big stick is away, people go back to doing whatever they were doing. Or in the case of imperium, you've got all this administrative, bureaucratic overhead. But auctoritas can be a surprisingly powerful way to get things done, and Lucas is a great example of that. Yeah. I think Teak as well, when he sort of spoke about how he sort of leveraged influence, especially when it came to student government elections, things like that. And in a situation like that, people would think that potestas or imperium has a big role to play in getting things done. But here again, auctoritas or influence really shines through and seems to have the sort of biggest sort of impact. Yet people don't seem to take notice of it when observing the system because it's subtler and under the surface.
And I mean, I was also kind of happy that Teak he mentioned SOC because it's such a big understated thing on campus. Like they literally control the government because of their network. And I mean, I've had some experience. I was on like a SOC related club, if you will. But I mean, really, when it came down to election season, we were almost told like, this is who you're going to vote for. And it was just the fact that there was such a big block and the network was so strong. It was almost like there was no one expecting you to go against it just because people would find out, and then you would lose your funding. You literally just wouldn't have any funding at all.
And again, auctoritas and influence is key to this process because it's all about finding the biggest influencers on campus and asking them for a favor to help promote the cause. So auctoritas seems to really shine through in those examples. Yeah.
Let's see, what else?
Should we do our main conclusion?
Yeah, let's do it.
So I think one of the primary things we sort of learned from this project was just how important auctoritas was on this campus and just in how many ways it actually manifested, be it in the administrative body, in the student body, in the student government. Even though it's not as visible, it really has a massive role to play. And extrapolating this to a larger system, maybe a lot of organizations in the world or even governments, even though on the outside it might seem that potestas and imperium are primarily what constitutes agency or getting things done, that auctoritas too has maybe even a bigger role to play in macroscopic systems. And being aware of this can really help us factor it in or design systems or have a greater awareness of how mega machines in the world operate.